In 1873 Arizona Territory, townspeople buried Delilah Washington neck-deep in desert sand, condemning the young black woman to die for allegedly cursing the Garrison family with her barrenness. What they failed to see was widowed rancher Samuel Hayes watching from the shadows, his two motherless children gripping his trembling hands. Behind his weathered exterior lay a former Union soldier carrying 3 years of guilt over his wife's tragic death. Recognizing in Delilah's defiant eyes the same pain that haunted his sleepless nights, now this broken father would risk everything his children had left to save a stranger who might become their salvation. The desert wind carried dust and secrets across the shallow grave. Samuel Hayes stood motionless, shovel trembling in weathered hands. Dirt clung to his boots like guilt to conscience. 2 small crosses marked the earth beside him, weathered wood, simple names carved by lamplight. His children watched from their horse. Mary clutched the reins with 8-year-old fingers. Thomas pressed against his sister's back, eyes wide with confusion only 6 years could hold. Samuel's voice cracked the morning silence. "Forgive me, Delilah. I should have been stronger." The words dissolved into wind and memory. 3 days earlier, the same wind had stirred the dust of Salvation Creek's Main Street. Samuel guided his wagon between the weathered buildings. Mary and Thomas bounced on the wooden seat beside him. Monthly supply runs brought them to town. Nothing more, nothing less. The crowd gathered near the general store caught his attention first. Voices carried anger and anticipation. Women clutched shawls tighter. Men spat into the dirt and nodded with grim satisfaction. Samuel pulled the wagon to a stop. His hands found the brake with practiced ease. The crowd parted like water around stone. In the center sat a young woman. Her wrists bore rope. Her back stayed straight despite the bonds. Delilah Washington. Samuel knew the name from whispered conversations in Sunday sermons. The cursed woman. The barren bride who brought drought and misfortune to the Garrison family ranch. Mary's voice cut through the crowd's murmur. "Daddy, why is the pretty lady tied up?" Samuel's throat tightened. Words wouldn't come. Delilah raised her head. Her eyes found his across the gathered townspeople. No fear lived in that gaze, only defiance, only dignity wrapped in quiet rage. The resemblance hit him like a physical blow. Sarah's eyes, Sarah's stubborn chin, Sarah's way of holding her head when the world pressed too hard. His hands began to shake. Thomas noticed first. "Daddy, your hands are moving funny." Samuel gripped the reins tighter. The leather cut into his palms. Preacher Morrison stepped forward from the crowd. His voice carried the weight of scripture and certainty. The good book speaks plainly about barren women, about those who bring curses upon righteous families. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the gathering. "Tonight, we cleanse this town of corruption. Tonight we return the rain to our fields and blessing to our homes." Samuel's chest tightened. He'd seen men die in the war. He'd buried friends in muddy fields far from home. But this felt different, colder. Delilah's eyes never left his face. Something passed between them. Recognition of shared pain, understanding of carried burdens. The crowd began to disperse. Preparations needed making. Justice required ceremony. Samuel drove the wagon to Miller's General Store. His children chattered about ribbons and peppermint sticks. Normal things, innocent things. He helped them down from the wagon seat. Mary's small hand found his. "That lady looks sad, Daddy." Thomas nodded with serious consideration. "Maybe she needs a friend." Samuel's throat closed completely. Inside the store, conversations stopped when he entered. Eyes followed his movement between the shelves. Whispers started behind cupped hands. Mrs. Henderson approached with careful steps. "Shameful business about the Washington woman, but necessary. The drought's killing our crops." Samuel counted coins for flour and beans. His voice stayed steady. "Drought's been building for months. Started when she came to the Garrison place. Everyone knows it." Mrs. Henderson's certainty brooked no argument. Some folks bring blessing, others bring curse. Mary tugged at Samuel's coat. "Can we see the pretty lady again?" Mrs. Henderson's face hardened. "Children shouldn't look upon corruption, Mr. Hayes. Protects their innocence." Samuel paid for his supplies without response. Evening brought torches and gathered voices. Samuel stood at his cabin window. 2 miles separated his ranch from town. Close enough to see the glow, close enough to hear the crowd. Mary and Thomas slept in their beds, peaceful faces, untroubled dreams. Samuel stepped onto his porch. The night air carried smoke and distant chanting. His wife's voice echoed in memory. Sarah's last words before the fever took her. "Promise me you'll protect them. Promise me you'll be stronger than I was." He made that promise, kept it for 3 years. The torches moved toward the edge of town, toward the ceremonial ground where sand burial awaited. Samuel's hands found his rifle, then stopped. Saving Delilah meant risking everything. his children's safety, their place in the community, the life he'd built from ash and determination. But letting her die meant something else, something that would eat at him like cancer and bone. He saddled his horse in darkness. The ride to town passed in heartbeats and eternity. Torches ringed the burial ground. Delilah knelt in freshly dug sand. Only her head remained above ground. The crowd chanted prayers and condemnations. Preacher Morrison raised his hands toward heaven. Samuel dismounted at the edge of the light. His rifle stayed in its scabbard. Delilah's eyes found his again. This time, they held a different message. Understanding. Acceptance. Forgiveness for what he couldn't do. Her lips barely moved, but he heard the words across impossible distance. Your wife didn't die in childbirth, did she? I can see it in your eyes, the same guilt I carry. Samuel's knees nearly buckled. The crowd pressed closer. Sand covered Delilah's shoulders. Soon it would cover everything. Samuel's hand moved toward his rifle, then stopped, then moved again. His children's faces floated in his mind. Mary's laugh. Thomas's questions about everything and nothing. The choice burned in his chest like swallowed fire. Samuel's hand closed around his rifle. The weight felt familiar, necessary. He circled wide around the torchlight. Old cavalry training guided his steps. Move quiet, strike fast, disappear clean. The grain storage shed sat 50 yards from the burial ground. Dry wood, older than memory. Perfect kindling for desperation. Samuel struck a match against his boot. The flame caught straw and timber like hunger catching hope. Fire bloomed against the night sky. Shouts erupted from the crowd. Men grabbed buckets and rope. The ceremonial circle broke apart like scattered ants. Samuel moved through the chaos, shadow among shadows. Delilah's eyes tracked his approach. No surprise lived in her face, only quiet recognition of shared necessity. His knife cut through the ropes at her wrists. Sand fell away as she pulled herself free. Can you ride? She nodded once. They reached his horse as the grain shed collapsed in on itself. Orange flames licked at the stars. The whole town fought the blaze with desperate hands. Samuel pulled Delilah up behind him. Her arms circled his waist without hesitation. Trust born from mutual understanding of survival. The ride to his ranch passed in silence and wind. Dawn broke gray over the horizon. Samuel helped Delilah down from the horse. She stood unsteady on legs that remembered being buried. Mary appeared in the cabin doorway. Sleep still clung to her dark hair. Daddy, who's the lady? Samuel's throat worked around words that wouldn't come. Delilah stepped forward. Her voice carried Boston refinement wrapped in desert dust. I'm someone who needs help. Your father has a kind heart. Thomas joined his sister in the doorway. His 60-year-old curiosity painted questions across his face. Samuel found his voice. She'll be staying for a while, helping with things. The lie tasted like ash. But lies sometimes protected better than truth. Over the following days, Delilah proved herself in quiet ways. She mended torn clothes with skilled fingers. She prepared meals that made the children smile. She moved through their small world like someone who understood the weight of making do. Her education showed in stolen moments. She helped Mary sound out difficult words from the family Bible. She taught Thomas to write his name in the dirt with a stick. Samuel watched from fence lines and doorways. The woman who'd been condemned as cursed brought light to corners of his home that had stayed dark since Sarah's death. Mary began following Delilah like a shadow. Questions poured from her like water from a broken dam. What was Boston like? Did she know how to braid hair fancy? Could she teach her to read the hard words? Delilah answered each question with patience Samuel had forgotten existed in the world. Thomas proved more cautious, but even he warmed to her gentle corrections and quiet praise. She treated his childhood observations like wisdom worth hearing. Samuel felt something shift in his chest. Guilt mixed with hope mixed with fear. The children hadn't smiled this much since before Sarah took sick. Evening brought the three of them to the porch. Mary sat braiding wildflowers while Delilah taught her a song from her childhood. Thomas whittled a stick into something resembling a horse. Samuel repaired harness leather and watched his family heal around this unexpected presence. Daddy, Mary said without looking up from her flowers. Miss Delilah knows lots of things. She taught me numbers today, Thomas added. Big ones. Samuel's hands still in the leather. That's so. Delilah's eyes met his across the porch. Something passed between them. Understanding, recognition. The beginning of something neither could name. The fourth night brought rain. Brief but welcome. Water drummed against the cabin roof like fingers against piano keys. Samuel stood at the window watching lightning illuminate the desert. Delilah appeared beside him. Her presence filled the space between them with unspoken words. They needed this, she said quietly. Samuel knew she meant more than rain. They've been without a mother's touch for 3 years. And you've been without a partner's understanding for just as long. The truth hung between them like morning mist. Fragile, dangerous, real. Samuel's hands found the window frame. I can't offer you anything permanent. Town finds out you're here, they'll come. I know. My children come first. Always. As they should. The rain intensified. Water ran down the glass like tears the desert had been saving. Tell me about Boston, Samuel said. Delilah's reflection smiled in the window. I was born free. My parents saved every penny to send me to school. I learned Latin and literature, mathematics and medicine. How'd you end up at the Garrison place? Her reflection grew still. James Garrison needed a tutor. His father heard about the educated daughter of a freedman family. Thought it might be interesting. Samuel waited. Rain filled the silence. James was kind at first, respectful. But kindness turned to expectation. Expectation turned to demand. You refused him. I refused to be owned twice, once by slavery's memory, once by marriage built on possession. Samuel understood. He'd seen enough of the world to recognize the weight she carried. So they invented the marriage. Made you the cursed wife instead of the woman who said no. Easier to explain that way. A barren wife brought God's judgment. A defiant teacher brought uncomfortable questions. Lightning illuminated her face in the glass, strong bones, determined jaw, eyes that had seen too much but refused to close. The children love you already, Samuel said. And I love them. That's what makes this impossible. What do you mean? Delilah turned from the window. Her hand found his arm briefly, gently. Love doesn't always mean staying, Samuel. Sometimes it means having the strength to leave before you destroy what you're trying to protect. The rain stopped as suddenly as it had started. Silence returned to the desert night. But something had changed in that small cabin, something that would reshape 4 lives whether they wanted it or not. 2 weeks passed like held breath. The desert remained stubborn in its thirst. Crops withered in fields around Salvation Creek. Cattle gathered near dried water holes and waited for mercy that never came. Samuel rode to town for supplies. Conversations stopped when he approached. Eyes followed his movements with new suspicion. Mrs. Henderson's voice carried across the general store. Heard you got help out at your place, Samuel. Samuel counted coins for flour and coffee. Managing fine. Ruth Caldwell mentioned seeing smoke from your chimney at odd hours. Wondered if you might have taken in a drifter. The words felt like fishing hooks cast into still water. Just me and the children. Mrs. Henderson's smile held no warmth. Course it is. Just wondering is all. Samuel loaded his supplies and left without further conversation. The ride home brought familiar weight to his shoulders. How long before questions became accusations? How long before suspicion became certainty? He found Delilah teaching the children in the shade behind the cabin. Mary practiced writing letters in the dirt. Thomas counted pebbles arranged in careful rows. Mama used to teach us numbers, Mary said to Delilah. But not like this. You make them dance. Samuel's chest tightened. Mary rarely mentioned Sarah anymore. Hearing her call Delilah by nearly the same name felt like blessing and betrayal wrapped together. That evening brought visitors. Ruth Caldwell approached on horseback just before sunset. Her weathered face carried concern like a burden. Samuel met her at the gate. His rifle stayed within reach, but out of sight. Evening, Ruth. Samuel. She dismounted with careful movements. Mind it, we talk. They walked toward the corral, far enough from the cabin to speak without small ears hearing. Town's buzzing about you harboring someone, Ruth said quietly. Samuel's hands found the fence rail. People talk. Sheriff Morrison's organizing search parties. Garrison families offering reward money. Serious money. The desert wind carried dust and implications between them. Ruth, I appreciate the warning. It's more than warning, Samuel. I know what he did. Samuel's blood turned to ice water. Ruth's eyes held understanding instead of condemnation. My husband died 5 years ago. Folks whispered I cursed him with my barren womb. Said I brought God's judgment on our farm. Samuel waited. Wind filled the silence between words. Know what it feels like to be blamed for things beyond your control. Know what it feels like when a whole town decides you're the reason for their troubles. Ruth. That one you saved, she's innocent. Just like I was innocent. Just like any woman who can't give a man the children he demands. Samuel's hands tightened on the fence rail. But innocence doesn't matter when people need someone to blame. Ruth mounted her horse with the same careful movements. They're coming tomorrow night. Thought you should know. She rode away before Samuel could respond. Samuel found Delilah on the porch after the children fell asleep. She sat mending one of Mary's torn dresses by lamplight. Her fingers worked the needle with practiced precision. We need to talk, Samuel said. She looked up from her sewing. Something in his voice had already told her everything. How long do we have? Tomorrow night? Maybe less. Delilah's hands stilled on the fabric. Then I leave at first light. The children will ask questions. Tell them I went home. Tell them I found where I belonged. Samuel sat beside her on the wooden steps, the desert night wrapped around them like a familiar coat. I don't want you to go. The words escaped before he could stop them. Truth spoken into darkness. Delilah's hand found his on the step between them. Fingers touched fingers. Nothing more. Everything more. I don't want to leave. Then don't. You know I have to. Samuel's throat closed around arguments that had no good endings. Tell me about Sarah, Delilah said quietly. The request hit him like cold water. Why? Because she's between us. Has been since the first night. Her memory deserves honesty. Samuel stared at the stars scattered across the black sky. Each point of light felt like a year of carried guilt. She died 3 winters ago. February. The children said she died having a baby. That's what I told them. Delilah waited, patient as stone, strong as water that carves canyons. We lost 2 babies before Thomas was born. Sarah took each loss like a personal failure, like God was punishing her for some sin she couldn't name. The desert wind picked up. Dust swirled around the cabin like restless spirits. After Thomas, she wanted to try again. Wanted to give him a brother or sister. I should have said no. Should have been satisfied with what we had, but you weren't. I wanted what she wanted. Family felt like the only good thing I'd built since the war. Samuel's voice dropped to barely above whisper. She got pregnant again. Lost the baby at 6 months. Something broke in her after that. Something I couldn't fix with all my trying. Delilah's hand tightened on his. Found her by the creek on a February morning. She'd walked into the water during the night. Couldn't bear the thought of failing again. The truth hung between them like smoke from a dying fire. I told the children she died birthing a baby that didn't survive. Easier than explaining why their mother chose to leave them. But the guilt of that lie has been eating you alive. Samuel nodded once, just like the guilt of being blamed for barrenness has been eating at me. They sat in silence. 2 wounded people recognizing their shared burden. I loved her, Samuel said. I know. But what I feel for you is different. Doesn't diminish what came before. Just adds something new. Delilah turned to face him fully. Her eyes held moonlight and unched tears. And that's why I have to leave, Samuel. Not because I don't love you and the children. Because I do. The lamp flickered in the desert wind. Soon it would burn out completely. Just like everything else good in Samuel's life. Dawn broke gray and unforgiving. Sheriff Morrison's posse appeared on the horizon like a dust storm with purpose. 8 riders spread across the desert approach to Samuel's ranch. Samuel watched from his bedroom window. His rifle leaned against the wall within reach. The children still slept in the next room. Delilah stood beside him. Her carpet bag sat packed by the door, ready for a departure that would never come. Too late to run, Samuel said quietly. Then we make our stand. The posse surrounded the cabin with practiced efficiency. Morrison dismounted first. His badge caught the morning light like a warning. Samuel stepped onto the porch. Delilah remained in the doorway behind him. Morning, Sheriff. Samuel. Heard you might be harboring a fugitive. Just me and my children here. Morrison's eyes found Delilah in the shadows. That's so. Mary appeared beside Delilah. Sleep-tousled hair and curious eyes. Thomas joined them a moment later. Who are all the men, Daddy? Samuel's throat tightened. Just visitors, sweetheart. Morrison stepped closer to the porch. Ma'am, you're under arrest for escaping lawful punishment. Delilah moved forward. Her chin lifted with familiar defiance. I'm ready. No. Mary's voice cut through the desert air. She's not going anywhere. Samuel turned toward his daughter, 8 years old and fierce as her mother ever was. Mary, go inside. She's our family now. You can't take family. Thomas nodded with 6-year-old certainty. Miss Delilah teaches us things. Good things. Morrison's hand moved toward his weapon. The gesture carried threat and impatience. A new voice called across the desert. Sheriff Morrison. Ruth Caldwell approached on horseback. Behind her rode 3 other women from town. Mrs. Patterson, Mrs. Webb, Mrs. Foster. Morrison frowned. Ladies, this is official business. Ruth dismounted with deliberate slowness. Official business based on what crime exactly? Escaping lawful punishment. For what crime? Mrs. Patterson asked from her horse. Morrison's certainty wavered slightly. Bringing curse upon the Garrison family. Curse. Ruth's voice carried decades of survived hardship, or refusing to marry a man she didn't love. The words hung in the desert air like heat shimmer. Mrs. Webb urged her horse closer. My husband told me what young James Garrison said when he was drunk last week, about the woman who wouldn't have him. Samuel felt the balance of the moment shifting like sand and wind. Morrison's hand stayed near his weapon. "Ladies, I have my orders." "From who?" Ruth stepped between the sheriff and the porch. "The Garrison family, or the law." "There's a difference?" one of the posse members muttered. Morrison's face darkened. "Stand aside, Ruth." "No." The single word carried weight of years. Weight of women who'd been blamed for men's failures. Weight of mothers who'd buried babies and been called cursed for their grief. Samuel moved down from the porch. His children followed close behind. Delilah brought up the rear. "Sheriff," Samuel said quietly, "maybe we should all head back to town. Let the territorial judge sort this out proper." Morrison's eyes narrowed. "You admitting to harboring a fugitive? I'm admitting to helping a woman who needed help." "That's not a crime," Mrs. Foster called from her horse. "Interfering with lawful punishment is." "What ought interfering with unlawful punishment?" Ruth asked. The standoff stretched like pulled wire. 8 armed men facing 4 women, 1 widower, and 2 children. But something had shifted in the desert air. Morrison looked at his men, then at the women, then at Samuel's children standing beside Delilah like she belonged there. "This isn't over," he said finally. "Yes, it is." Ruth's voice carried finality. "We're all going back to town, together, and we're going to have a proper discussion about justice and law." The posse mounted their horses with reluctant movements. Morrison climbed into his saddle last. "You're making a mistake, Ruth." "Maybe, but it's my mistake to make." The riders departed across the desert. Dust settled in their wake like the end of something old and the beginning of something uncertain. Samuel turned to thank Ruth. Found her already mounting her horse. "This doesn't solve everything," she said quietly, "but it buys you time to figure out what comes next." The women rode away toward town. Samuel watched until they disappeared into heat shimmer. Mary tugged at Delilah's dress. "Are you staying now?" Delilah knelt beside the little girl. Her hands smoothed Mary's tangled hair. "I don't know, sweetheart. Some things are complicated. Adults always say that when they don't want to tell the truth." Thomas joined his sister. "We want you to stay." "I know." Samuel felt his heart breaking and healing simultaneously. Watching this woman love his children. Watching his children love her back. "What if we left?" he said quietly. "All of us. Started over somewhere new." Delilah looked up at him. Hope and fear warred in her eyes. "People like us don't get to start over, Samuel. The world follows us wherever we go." "Maybe, but maybe it's worth trying." Mary clapped her hands together. "We could go to California. I heard it's pretty there." "Or Oregon," Thomas added, "with big trees and rivers." Samuel knelt beside Delilah and his children. 4 people who'd found each other in the desert. 4 people who might make a family if the world allowed it. "What do you say?" he asked Delilah. She looked at each of their faces, memorizing them like she might never see them again. "I say we try." 3 days later, Samuel stood at the 3 graves behind his cabin. 2 old crosses and 1 new marker. He'd carved Sarah's name honestly this time. Added the dates of her life. Added the words "beloved mother" beneath. The other graves held the lies he'd buried. The shame he carried. The guilt that had nearly destroyed him. Mary and Thomas watched from their packed wagon. Delilah sat between them, holding reins to their new life. Samuel finished covering the symbolic grave. Dirt and secrets finally laid to rest. A rider appeared on the horizon, moving fast toward their ranch. Samuel shaded his eyes against the morning sun. His heart began to race. "Daddy," Mary whispered from the wagon, "is that Miss Delilah's friend coming to say goodbye?" Samuel squinted at the approaching figure. Not Delilah's friend. Not anyone who meant them well. The rider's silhouette became clearer. Tall man, expensive horse, riding like he owned the desert and everything in it. Samuel's blood turned to ice water. Marcus Whitfield, Sarah's brother, the man who'd sworn to take the children if he ever learned the truth about his sister's death. Samuel's knees buckled as recognition hit him fully. The carefully carved headstone behind him told the story he'd hidden for 3 years. Marcus had come for his niece and nephew, and now he knew everything. And that is all to the story for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you, it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.